Okay, this is Stampscaping 101. Thanks for tuning in. This is a scene that I just finished, and I did it over the course of 2 nights. I think on the first part of this video, I probably worked on it, the composition, and mostly at the time, this scene, it spent kind of figuring out the tonal structure of this scene. It's so light up here and dark down here, and through most of the video I wasn't quite sure of what direction this was going to go in, and how to resolve certain things that kind of weren't working out. This is a really long video. Well, I guess all of them kind of are. I need to edit some of these down or do a time lapse, but it's a scene that I really enjoyed finishing off, putting on the finishing touches with something like, the gel pen and the pigment inks to kind of bring everything together. I wanted a scene with a lot of atmosphere and depth and the use of kind of muted subject matter and a muted kind of palette up there. Was the way I achieved that, but how to incorporate that in with the bottom portion was a bit of a struggle. I like the reflections going on in here, and the layering of a lot of different tones. I stamped out so much imagery in here, and some of it would just get lost, as I would apply more inks over the top of it, so I had to keep restamping it. But anyway, it kind of got to an area that I was pleased in, and it was one that I had no idea of the direction through most of it. So, super long video, cut to the end or whatever, but, well, I guess this is the end result, but especially where a lot of this kind of came into play in terms of the little highlights and stuff like that, kind of really brought it to life. But anyways, thanks again for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the scene. Okay, let's try something really kind of different, at least for me, in the scene right here. I liked some of the color combinations that I was getting in the last couple videos, as far as some experiments with gray tones and warm versus cool colors. Well, I mean, not warm versus cool, but kind of using them in conjunction with one another. Let's see here. I don't know what colors I want to start off with. Here's that gray London fog. I used it on one of the last scenes. Aqua. Well, I start off with a lot of tones like that, but maybe this will give us a kind of a foundation to start off with. And let's do this. This is the re-inker fluid. Sometimes if I'm going to go for a lot of coverage on something, I just start off with the re-inker rather than inking up my applicator a million times. I just get a good slathering of it on here before I go into it. Okay. Now this scene is going to be... Let's kind of create a transition of tones here. I want this to be kind of a, I really want this to be a kind of a moody scene, I think. Featuring kind of a transition of hue and value. Kind of keeping it in the mid to light tones. See, this is going to be, I want to do something where it's like a flooded plain, kind of like seasonal wetlands or something like that. And I'm keeping this kind of streaky, something that might represent like a body of water. Okay. And the scene has not been practiced. I don't know. I mean, none of these videos that I'm doing, you know, have been practiced before, but this one especially so. Totally impromptu, so if my description here is, you know, pretty poor, you know why. Because I know what I'm doing as far as the technique goes, but as far as what the specific scene is going to look like, you know, I have absolutely no idea. Okay, kind of streaky. Well, it's very streaky, and that's what I want here. And that's getting a good solid foundation of a nice slippery thick color. Okay. I don't want this one to be too bright though. I think I want it to be, oh, I don't know, more, I guess the description might be kind of a, I don't know if somber would be the word. Just more kind of muted and, I don't know, still, peaceful. I guess that's kind of the descriptive words I would be going for here. Something that maybe, you know, like watercolors would be more suited for, as far as kind of depicting or achieving a certain feel. Okay, always going from each side, and you can see I'm always kind of rotating the page for the stroke, okay? Rarely am I keeping this like this and going across like this. This isn't a natural motion to me, okay? So I just feel it's, you know, keep the motion of the applicator, whatever you happen to be using, really comfortable for your hand, and that, you know, something indicative of that would be, you know, the way your hands naturally fall. Okay, that's the way mine go, and this feels like a perfectly natural motion. Don't have it way extended or something like that, you know. Have it nice in a nice comfortable position. Okay, that way you won't kind of experience fatigue. This is not heavy-handed. If I want to get more ink down, I just do multiple swipes of it, okay? I'm not pressing hard with this. It's just a real quick, you know, and repetitive motion of the hand, but it's in a perfectly ergonomic position, so I never feel any hand strain or fatigue when I'm doing that. Okay, it's just basically touching that and just pulling it across, you know. Just let the let that sponge, you know, soft tip applicator do the work. Okay, it's kind of giving me a little bit of feeling of water. I don't know if there was any color on this wand beforehand. I don't think so. But just these two colors so far, you know, are giving me a pretty decent range of hue and value, and you know, it's achieving kind of a nice character, I would say. And this is the Marvy number 12 gray, just over the aqua Adirondack Lights color. I use the Ranger fluid, but you know, that of course comes in pad form as well. you know, since it's a re-inker. Alright, let's see. I'm trying to think if I want to use some warmer tones in there, and why not? Let's go for the Distress Ink hue of tea dye. Let's test it out on the side. Okay, now I kind of cleaned off my tip here from that gray. Let's test this. Let's add that down into that gray. I wouldn't say that it's a, you know, this combination right here at this time isn't isn't something I would call a nice looking combination. But this is it's going to serve as more of a base layer, alright? Because I do have other colors that are come after this. So it's a warmth, and it's fairly bright and rich in terms of the value. I like the you know, the color range of these Distress Inks. Okay. Maybe I'll add a little bit of this warmth in the area that will end up being the top of the scene. All right. Does that look like kind of light coming through, kind of in a misty morning, kind of reflecting down here in the flooded area? I don't know. You have to use your imagination, I guess. Let's see. Let's transition a little bit. Let's move into some green tones down here. Alright, so it's not so uniform from top to bottom as far as the colors used. Okay, this is a pale green, Marvy pale green. I like that pale green where it kind of goes across just an area that I've left the pure white of the page card. That pale green really shows up nice and bright. Okay. Alright. Sometimes, you know, well, sometimes, but almost, I don't know, most of the time I guess would be more accurate. When you're doing this type of color application, you know, this layered ink style, alright, you get all this really this build-up happening. And for me, at some point in time, if not most of the time, during the process, the card or the background isn't looking like, you know, anything like what I might hope it will look like in the end result. Okay, meaning that during the processes of this, you know, you have to, you know, for me, I have to kind of let it develop. And you know, I forget about this a lot of times when I'm doing this because I've been doing this for so long. But you know, if I was to describe it to someone, it would be that let things develop, and then a lot of times during the process, it's like, man, you know, if I think about it, I'm saying, well, that doesn't really look that great. Now, like, I laid this green on top of here, and I think that looks really nice in there. And it looks nice, though, because of all those colors underneath it. It's more rich that way. Well, okay. That being said, okay, here's just this green, and I did put it over the top of a lot of, you know, that area that was already laid down there. Okay? But now this is pale green, okay, on its own. You know, it's a nice color and everything. But I mean, this, to me, it's so much more alive and vibrant and whatnot. This is okay, you know, if you're going for something like that, but, you know, when you're layering these inks down, I just think it becomes so much more, I don't know, alive and rich. You know, that warmth under there from the distress ink, that gray and whatnot. It's just, it's a more nuanced surface when you layer these colors down, kind of in multiples. There's no set formula or something like that. Like, yeah, okay, well, you have to use 5 inks or something like that, you know, or, you know, it's not like that. But, you know, these inks are transparent, so the things that you lay down underneath it are going to affect the, you know, the end result in terms of what something might look like in the end. Okay, now the big question is for me, when it comes to this scene, is, you know, how far do I want to take it when it comes to colors? And I'm going to go with some more of this gray here on top. I'm going to see if this even shows up. It doesn't even look like it's showing up here. It's so light. But I thought, okay, I want to subdue a little bit of that green that I laid down in some of these areas. I didn't want it quite so bright and as wide of an area, so I'm going to lay some of it down again right on top, okay? Yeah, maybe like so. Alright, maybe for kicks, let's try this number 10 blue. It's fairly bright. Let me take some of the ink off so, you know, it won't be too influential with the first couple swipes. Okay. That's pretty good. Let's add some more of it down. Okay. Some areas that I lay it over it, probably because it has the green showing through underneath, it's kind of more of a turquoise hue. Okay, it's pretty interesting. I've done quite a few scenes over the last, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and I don't know, I need to get to some other things, but sometimes when you kind of get into the swing of things and you're kind of doing a lot of experiments, you kind of want to stick with it, kind of stay in the rhythm of it. And I don't know, right now it's kind of a time of exploration, you know. Stamping wise. Alright. This is a tree. It's called Oak Tree Large, and I'm going to stamp it out in, let's go with the gray. Yeah, let's do that. I want it pretty light. And what's going through my mind now is do I want it to be only gray, or what values of it do I want? Do I want to have it, you know, kind of a lighter value down here at the base? Maybe. I think I want it to be kind of in a, coming out of the fog. So let's wipe off, you know, a decent amount of it right at the base of the trunks, and let's transition it a little bit. So I'm taking off a lot of ink down here, a little bit of ink, a little bit as it moves up. Okay. I don't want it too streaky though. Okay, let's see. I'll tell you what. A little bit of ink removed off of the some of the perimeter. Maybe where light's kind of coming in from the background. I have to be careful though, because I'm not stamping this out in black, so I have to take into consideration, you know, how much of the impression is going to show if you take off too much of that ink. We'll see. Standing up to give it good leverage and to get enough pressure in the center of the stamp to get a good impression. Okay. Ooh, that is really light. Okay. Alright. But that is what we're going to go with. I guess that's kind of what I was going for. Alright. We'll see how it goes. Okay, inked it up again, and I'm blotting some of this off. Taking some of the ink off the perimeter. Alright. Now this isn't going to be a perfect mirrored reflection, mirror image, I know that. But I don't want to take the time, you know, doing a mirror impression. Alright, for some reason the camera's shut down here. I'm going to go for a mirror, you know, a reflection down here. And what I was getting at was, I know this isn't a complete mirror image, so you don't need to put that down in the comments section. I do know that, so but I don't really care about that. It'll be kind of mirrored enough for me. Alright. So I just tried to match up the trunks there a little bit. Okay. Now, that's kind of going off into the distance. It's kind of interesting, and I'm wondering kind of how it's going to work out, and we shall see. This is the pond stamp, and I'm going to stamp it down here. I'm kind of curious to know what color I'm going to have to do it in. Let's do it in black, but I tell you what, this is kind of a 56 pen, Marby pen. I have no idea what the name of the color is. but I don't really care either. I just want it to be something lighter than black, just to give it a little bit of variation. Okay. Stamp this at the base. Okay, and let's go for a couple more impressions of it, like it's kind of a flooded area. Do I do it in black or? I'm not sure. Let's just do it in this pen right here. Let's go for the second impression, just color this up. If you have kind of a black, you can use it, or a gray. Or if you have a pen, put some black down there and put blue or something like that. Okay. Kind of doing it a little bit off center from the previous impression. That's a good color right there. It's just, you know, it's just lighter in value. But it also depends on how dark your area got. Okay. Alright. Overlapping a little bit from one impression to the next. Alright, and let's see here. Let's say, you know, the flooded area has some seasonal lilies in there. I think that'll give that, you know, a better indication of the reflective quality of the surface there. Because right now, people, you know, if people looked at that, they wouldn't know it's a, you know, if it's supposed to be a shadow or if it's supposed to be a reflection in the water. Adding something like this, I think, will be, you know, it'll give it more of an anchor as far as, you know, something indicative of a watery surface. Alright. Using the black, and why don't I go in here with a little bit of green, just for variation in the impression. Let's blot it off a little bit though. Let's not go with the full value of that inking. Okay, and let's layer that across the reflection portion. Okay, that's working great. Down there. Okay. Get that to focus. Okay. Now we're going to need some more of that. Definitely. I think I need to do this more often. I love that look there, the way that's kind of coming out. Okay. Trying to think of how much do I want to use of that in there. Here's some water ripples. Do I want that ripply effect in there? I don't know if I do. If I do it, I want it just really, really subtle. Okay, here's another tree in the background. You know what I think? This is Leafless limbs, and I suddenly forgot what color I stamped that in. I think it was gray, not green. Alright. Let's blot that off. Let's see what the second... Okay. Okay, blotting it off. wiping off the bottom portion, where the bottom portion is kind of definitely in fog. Okay, the tree in the background. And I don't want to do that reflection in there. Okay, and let's see. Let's do something with this fence here, where it's kind of submerged in the water. And I'm gonna have to really figure out how to do that. Okay. Okay, so let's wipe off some of that. So I don't want too much of that grass or anything like that showing. But maybe we can do something like this. All right. I like the way that this scene is kind of going, but there's something that's not really, I need something to tie it all together. It's too fragmented from top to bottom. And I'm kind of leaning towards, it needs another color, I think. At least in this bottom portion right here, it's just too fragmented. There's a lot of textures and things like that. But I'm not quite sure yet. Let's add on a few more textures before I do that. Alright, now I kind of been using this a lot. These stamps lately. But I really like these rocks. These rock textures. Okay, this is the tiny rocks. Large. I think it's just called tiny rocks. But let's do that and let's do it in a real light tone. Let's try this London fog here. Okay, test it. I think I must have used green on this and not cleaned it off, because that stamped out a little bit gray-green. It still looks green to me for some reason. Yeah, maybe that London fog has a little bit of warmth to it. Yeah, we'll see. Okay. Ooh, that is really, really light. Okay, I could stand to go with the full impression of it. You know, in other words, not blot it off first. Now, you can unify things in areas with the use of color, and I do that all the time. As I stamp this rock out right here, it's one of those things you can unify things with the use of texture too. And I think this is suddenly helping quite a lot. Okay, now back in that area, you know, the distance, I just blotted this, and let's go for a, you know, an impression of it back in the distance. And that is really, really subtle. Let's try another one on the other side. Okay, this is starting to come together for me. You know what I was saying, you know, sometimes the scene starts to come together with the use of a certain color. As far as hue goes, I think the impressions and scene structure are starting to come together for me with this stamp. Which, you know, the larger you work, this is a half-page scene, it's very long, you know, it's 11 inches. You know, sometimes you have to work with the structure a little bit, you know, a little bit more than, say, on a quarter-page card. And, you know, that's probably pretty obvious, but all right. See how all the textures kind of coming into play? Maybe I should try some other colors in there as well with that. It might be kind of interesting. Alright, going for a few more impressions. Not that, you know, a lot is good, and even more is better, but I think in this case you know, it's really benefiting so far. Alright. Figuring things out as I go along. Okay, that was the London fog. Let's try the smaller rock. Let's see how this looks. I'm going to be doing some impressions in the Marvy gray. Let's kind of layer that a little bit. Tiny rocks small again. Alright. I think this is probably the least I've ever talked on a video. And by the way, I think when I do these videos, I probably talk more in one of these videos than I usually do in an entire week. But, I don't know. I don't have some kind of like background music or something like that for these videos at this time, but probably the more I'm thinking and kind of figuring things out, probably there's less than I probably blab on less. Because on this scene right here, I just really don't know where I'm going to go with it. Let's see here. Let's go into some additional tone now. Get this kind of pebbled, super textured surface. Alright. That really needs to be addressed in terms of, you know, bringing a a uniformity to it. And usually I do that with the use of common colors, common hue. And that London fog, I don't know how it's going to appear, but I figure since I stamped out so many of the elements and so many impressions of that rock, I feel like for the scene, I really have to use this in the scene. Okay, now what I'm finding is that I probably stamped out those rocks onto kind of a fairly wet cardstock at that point in time, with all those inks and layers of color that were used. So those impressions aren't exactly dry. So as I streak across there, I'm almost kind of eradicating them because they're just kind of wiping off. So I'm doing a little bit more of a dabbing motion here, so I'm not wiping something off. Okay. Now this color is working pretty good in terms of bringing a bit of continuity to the scene, but I do feel like I'm losing something in terms of those shapes in there, so I might go back and layer even more shapes in there, but I'm going to see how, where the scene goes first in terms of the color scheme and what it can handle. Okay. Adding some more of this gray to the top portion. Getting that tree, that background tree, to kind of blend in a little bit more. A bit of uniformity to it. And continuity, etc., etc. Okay. Alright. Now, let's go to black. I'm looking at this area down here, and that bothers me. That impression is fairly dark, so I have a feeling that black, I didn't know if it would on this one, because I stamped out a lot of things lighter, but just even having that kind of delicate, fairly delicate, airy impression of that is kind of making it necessary to also bring in that same value into the scene to kind of bring it all together. Okay. Yep. And this was the kind of the answer I can see, I think. Well, we'll see. You can see the top portion of it, how it's really starting to change a little bit. Going with this black over the top of that area down below, it's kind of introducing an interesting hue to the mix, because black isn't reading as black, especially where it's over some color. It's kind of reading as kind of different shades of warm and cool gray almost, because this is kind of a dry brushing of the black on there. And so far it's reasonably effective, I'm finding, in terms of that continuity that, you know, that we're looking for here. It's kind of grabbing a little bit. Let's get some of this Memento gray into the pad. Memento is kind of a more slipperier, more slippery ink, thick. Okay. Let's kind of bring that into the mix a touch. By putting some of that Memento London fog on that tip here, and then dipping into my black ink, the ink is really spreading so much easier for me, which is a good thing. It was grabbing too much, and I was having a hard time kind of towards up in this area where there wasn't too much ink. Okay. Well, it's definitely looking layered. Alright, now what I didn't anticipate was so much of that tiny rocks image, you know, disappearing, so I'm going to go back in and reintroduce it. Now, what color I do it in, I don't know. Let's see if this gray still stands out enough. Kind of. I'm stamping kind of wet into wet where it's kind of not really showing all that well. We might have to go darker. Yeah. Let's try this. Let's go to black. Let's try a second impression of black. You know, I guess a lighter version. Putting lighter impressions kind of in the center where it's lighter. Darker impressions on the perimeter. some of the most impressions I've ever used, I think, of one image in a scene before. Let's see here. I'm looking for another stamp. Let's try something here. Okay, this is Winter Twigs, one of them. It's hard to say what color to do on this scene. It's really kind of confusing. I don't think there's any right or wrong, but kind of with what I'm going after, it's, you know, I'm kind of thinking about this mood. Alright, let's try this. Okay, this is done in black. Alright, I'm going to blot it first. And maybe blot off a little bit of the base, maybe. And kind of have it coming out of the grasses. Alright. Now that didn't show up at all. So, alright, I'm going to have to do this in full black here. Let's do it out here. Let's do it on a little bit of the perimeter. Just to be safe. Looks okay. Not great. Yeah, not bad. Okay. I need to get gutsier here. Let me go with we need a bolder impression, I think, of something, and I think I might know what this could use. We need a nice, bold, big image, you know, for the foreground here. Stamp it out in black. I don't want this sitting right in the middle of the scene. I want it to kind of be coming from, you know, the base. Alright, nice bold impression and transfer of ink. Nice bold silhouette against that background. And it kind of relates to that, you know, those craggy trees in the background, leafless ones. Okay. There. Into the distance. Somewhat unbalanced, so I'm going to do another impression of it, maybe on this side. Let's change the angle a little bit, or at least the height. Okay. Alright, this scene needed something, so I went and picked out a couple more images that I thought, you know, might work pretty good in here. Let's anchor down the base of the scene a little bit more with some dark imagery. This is the Reed's large stamp that I use so often. and I don't know, everything was just kind of leaning in that direction here, I think. And here's the buck, large. And I was thinking about it up here. Something kind of standing in the water. Kind of a mysterious focal point. Thing is getting the right color for it. I don't want it to stand up too much, but I also don't want it to be so light that you just can't see it. And what color you stamp it out is going to be reasonably important. I think gray, because it's going to represent kind of being back at that same distance. But again, I'm not sure how wet this page is, so I'm not sure what what it's going to look like after I stamp it out. Oh well. Let's just be gutsy and try it out. Okay, if it's standing in water, I'm going to take the base of this away. Okay, I'm not going to stamp with that dark bottom part. Alright, let's see. I'll do it a little bit off center, and I kind of want to put them right in that kind of light area. Alright, let's try it out. Make your impression and pray. I'm holding this down because I really want to get that ink transferred over there. I want it to have a good bold gray, not kind of a, a feeble one. But I don't want them to stand out too much, though. That's the thing. And this scene's been very confusing for me. But I kind of like the way it's turning out. But I just need to pull it together, and that helped, I think, immensely. See that right there? You're talking about this big composition, but kind of nothing was going on in it so far. I mean, a lot of textural things, but as far as subject matter goes, it needed something else. Alright. A little bit more black. Alright. As I've applied some things in here, some things that kind of disappeared as it's kind of set up a little bit. I had a lot of gray mixed in with my black. It's a little bit more. I have no idea how long this video's gotten to. Talk about the need for editing. Well, I guess YouTube, it's perfect at editing. You can always just fast forward at any time if you've made it this far. I think I want to leave the top as is. I don't want to cap it off too much with darker tones. you know, as much as kind of instinctually I feel like I need to do something like that, but I'm kind of going against my inclination. I know something else that I think I need to do in here too. I think I need to give, you know, some of this grassy area, you know, some of the land area, a little bit of mass, a little bit of volume. Let's try the torn paper technique. Okay, let's add some of that in here in a couple areas. Let's do this right here. There, creating a little bit of land. Let's do it over here. I'm kind of doing it where I have kind of these streakier areas coming in there anyway. Good. Okay, I need to do this upside down. I can't. I really need to change the angle again. Let's give that buck something to stand on. You know, a little bit of land creeping in there. Kind of rip again. If you kind of use the same part too much, what eventually it starts doing is soaking through, you know, the paper towel. A little bit more on this side, and I think that should do it. Kind of transition it a little bit, you know, where it's a little bit darker, and then you kind of peter it out a little bit, or it blends in with the background. should just leave that cover off this tack and peel using this unmounted, I use unmounted stamps a lot, so. Okay, I'm going to add some of this leafless foliage to a couple of these little mounds that have been established. Alright, that's it on this stamping and coloring portion of the scene. We did all that. Now it's time to, now the fun begins after that, whatever 5-hour period of time. And I'm just joking, but I think this might be the last half-page scene I do for a while. If you notice, I kind of start doing the smaller scenes after I do a really large scene, because and then I kind of forget about how long these ones take again, then I kind of go back to doing it. So, alright, let's see here. I'll talk about a scene that can use, you know, a little bit of a unifying texture, and this would certainly be one of them. This is a white gel pen, and I'm adding some little reflections into my water. Okay. Creating a kind of a passage of light that would be coming through here. This area down here is very light, so that it could stand to have some larger little dots here. Now, I'm going to, I think I am going to semi-edit this, but let me come back and let me add more of these, and I'll show you kind of what that looks like in a bit, okay? Okay, I am back. What I just did was I gave this scene overnight to kind of set and dry. And what I'm doing right now is I'm going in and continuing on the highlighting process. I was thinking about just adding all the highlights in and cutting that out of the video here, because the video was already getting so long. Just in terms of the toning process and the composition, but I liked how this was coming along now. The inks have dried, so it's kind of mellowed a little bit, and I'd have to say I really like kind of where this scene's gone. Okay. As far as continuity goes, yesterday I wasn't quite sure if it was getting, you know, there, you know, kind of where I wanted it to go, and I'd have to say that, you know, when I came back today and I checked it out again, I thought, ah, okay, this looks, you know, this looks better than what I remembered yesterday. And I think just, I don't know, give time for the things to set, and it looks a little bit more muted than when the inks were wet. And when the inks were a little bit wet, you know, when they were wet, freshly stamped, there was more contrast. Now normally I like that, you know, I want contrast and vibrant, rich tones, but in this case I think kind of more maybe muted and subdued is appropriate, at least for the mood that we're going for. So, anyways, adding some of these highlights, I kind of liked, I always like highlights, but I thought, okay, I better flip the video back on, because I think these are really adding an important element to this scene. See those kind of highlights going right over that reflection of that tree, and how these sort of lily grass impressions are really kind of adding to that mirrored surface. I'm going to put a few little highlights on top of this little ridge here. Let's do that same thing on the other side. Is that kind of light in there? Right there. A few little dots. And again, what this is doing is it's adding that, when it comes to, say, like photography, it's that specular light that these dots represent. It's light. What it's representing, it's not light that's brighter than white. I mean, this is white, but in this scene it's kind of representing that light, you know, like a reflected little twinkle of light. Kind of bring these trees out of the background slightly. I don't want to add too much to them. But maybe just enough. Okay, now this oak tree in the background is it's really very light, and these little dots really aren't going to create too much of a contrast, but because there's tone back there, even a very light, pale, warm gray, I still think we can kind of achieve more dimension from adding the highlights here and there on the tree. And again, it kind of turns it in space. It's saying that you know, it's not a flat two-dimensional object. It's, well, it is, but it's not representing that. Trying to give it a little bit more dimension, turning the tree in space. See those little dots over that tree? It's like all shimmering kind of silver light almost. I think even this other tree in the background could stand a few little highlights. There's that fence there, and where's the fence? There it is. Let's go and add a few little highlights to that. Okay, let's not go overboard. I just added a couple little to that elk. Okay. There's a little bit of patterning around in this area, and I mentioned earlier in the video that you kind of have to change your paper towel area, otherwise it kind of starts soaking through, and that's what happened there. But I mean, I'd prefer that that didn't happen, because now I'm going to have to go into it and repair that area a little bit and take out some of that. But I was planning on going in there anyway with some pigment ink, so let's do that. Let me see. Okay, here we go. I hope I still have some of this Brilliance pigment ink. It's called Moonlit White. I'll see. I don't know. I don't think I've ever re-inked it, but I haven't used it for a while. But I might want some more kind of opacity, and sometimes the color box, because of its kind of qualities, slow drying and kind of easy to manipulate characteristics. Sometimes it doesn't allow you to add a very thick version of it, you know, which in terms of the application of it helps us out in terms of you know, the user-friendly quality of it. But sometimes I want to add a little bit more punch to the application, and sometimes if I add too much, what happens is you know, I start dabbing down on, you know, some of that pigment ink, and because I'm using it in a very thin layer and kind of allowing it to dry a touch, sometimes when I try to apply more and more and more to make it that the area is more opaque and white. It's almost like I'm lifting off what I've already put down, so sometimes you have to go with the Brilliance ink and use it for its qualities, which is, you know, its reputation for drying quickly on, say, glossy cardstock, so it sets very fast, and sometimes that's, you know, that might be what you're going after in some cases. In this case, there's going to be a lot of mist and fog. I mean, that's kind of the entire idea of this scene, you know, more than, you know, say I want it to be about a tree and a lake or something like that. Really wanted this one to be, you know, I wanted the atmosphere of this to be the, you know, the real character of the scene, the star of the scene, so to speak. Okay, adding this down in the water. It's kind of muting the reflection a little bit in some areas, so I like that. I don't want to do it over the whole thing, but I like that kind of oscillation of crisp and, you know, diffused a little bit. It's very subtle right now. This is where I'm going to have to use the pigment ink. I mean, you know, the Brilliance, if it works, if it's not too dry. But it's a very safe area to use this pigment ink. It's very light in here, and, you know, I'm using white, so the white doesn't really stand out very much. So it's just easy for me just to take this right out of the right off the pad and go directly in there. Keep building it up down here a little bit more. Ideally, what I want, when I'm generally doing this, what I want there to be, in terms of this pigment ink, I want it thick in some areas, and then I want there to be a diffusion on the edges. So there's like a little bit more and then less, no matter where I go. So let's say at the base of a tree where, you know, I want there to be a lot of mist. Well, I don't want it to have a sharp edge. I want it to slowly kind of, you know, diffuse as it moves away from that thickest point. So what I have is a thicker layer of it and less up here. I don't try to go in with thick right off the bat. What I do is I give it a thin layer, and then I target another, you know, I let that set up for a little bit, and then I target a certain little area, and I just go and I add on a little bit more and a little bit more accordingly. Okay, a little bit of mist in the background around this tree. I want it to be fairly subtle. Okay, start taking this kind of fog down into the darker areas. In the darker areas, in this case, it's going to be the foreground, the area that's a little bit closer. Okay, so this mist doesn't show up too much in the distance. You know, it's more subtle, in other words. There's less contrast between white pigment ink and the background colors. Down here, it, you know, it'll show up more. The pigment ink will. So just, you know, adjust your application of it. Don't go too fast. See it kind of coming in right there. And I'd have to say again, I really like what's kind of going on in the scene. When I looked at this today, it's really kind of similar to another composition that I did, the other one that I did, of kind of this waterway and whatnot. It was in a kind of a monochromatic rustic palette, and this is kind of a more, I felt this was a more kind of mature version of that one, just in terms of the layering of all that different imagery and stuff going on underneath the water, where I had to go back in and reintroduce a lot of the forms that were kind of disappearing with the addition of more inks and whatnot. Specifically, it was those the tiny rocks images, and just the fact that I left that kind of light, you know, something that I like. And I don't know, sometimes I just don't, you know, I'm kind of, you know, a little bit hesitant, I guess, to stamp imagery too light, you know. But I think it was really effective, and I should probably do it more. Really adds a kind of a nice atmosphere to the scene. Alright. I should have really medals made up for anyone that really makes it through any of these videos of mine. It's probably more like me watching HD TV or something like that. Kind of just fast forwarding, you know, kind of taping it and fast forwarding to the reveal and all those different types of design shows. Alright, adding even more mist. What I'm finding is that as I add this in, just over the course of a few minutes, I'm finding that as this sets a little bit, it becomes a little bit more translucent to transparent, and I keep having to go back in and add a little bit more. Add more for it to even kind of show up in the, you know, to the degree that I want it to, in terms of this pigment ink over. I've added a lot of that pigment ink, and what I'm finding also is that, and I think, I think having this camera kind of taping this, recording this, and having the screen, the camera screen back at the LCD, looking into that, I think that's kind of helping me in some ways. What I'm looking at is a miniature version of this scene, and I thought, yeah, some of those little white dots are really, I like them, but I thought, it could use a bit of continuity, just like the darker images. So what this is doing a little bit, adding some of this pigment ink over a grouping of those little dots, is it's kind of unifying them a little bit more. And again, that word that I'm always talking about, but it's kind of bringing continuity to the scene, I feel. Alright, let me see here. Alright, we've added some pigment ink, dye-based ink, in that kind of sponging technique. Why don't we add some of that pigment ink in this torn paper technique, as well. Kind of balances things out. You have something done in a positive, meaning dark on white, and why not do it in kind of reverse, light on dark, and that would represent kind of a mist or a haze in the background. Right back in there. It's kind of creating its own terrain in itself, isn't it? It's kind of where this is covering up. It's thus giving it the the characteristic of that landscape back there. It's saying, okay, there's a little bit of a hill there, and that hill is kind of being defined by the light behind it in the form of illuminated mist. Okay? You see right back in the back of that deer right there. And I don't know, once you do something and if you kind of like it, it's kind of hard to stop. Sometimes you want to keep adding it, trying it in different areas in the scene. Let's try it down here. Okay, too much. Another layer. At the base of our subject matter, focal point, kind of a buck. Okay, let me try it here. Let's try the Brilliance ink. And that pad feels a little bit dry. Yeah, what's going on there? Yeah. Actually, the dry feels kind of good. It's not applying it too fast. Kind of having a drier pad for this type of use is kind of handy. Okay, let's see what we have here. I think that looks pretty good to me. I think we've kind of pushed space in the scene. We have a lot of texturing and atmosphere. Let's see. Let's go top bottom. Lighter in the background, kind of a diffusion of imagery, because the kind of the moist atmosphere, presumably, of a very misty scene, transitioning from light imagery or subject matters, trees and whatnot, reflecting it down here, layering it with the lily grass reflections, transitioning to darker, more contrasted areas in terms of dark to light. You know. And there we have it. Okay, half-page scene, done on a vertical, and one that was a lot of fun to put the final touches on. I wouldn't say the entire process was fun, because it was kind of a struggle, kind of bringing it together. I was fighting it, you know, in some ways. But I think what happened was these little islands in here really helped out. These bits of darker areas in here, and then the contrasted little rocks and whatnot, and going dark down below helped it out a lot too. So it's weighted a lot heavier on the bottom, but I feel that you know, you look down here and the viewer's eye kind of meanders about up here into this area and kind of out through the distance, you know. And I don't know, just I really enjoyed kind of the end results of this scene. So I hope you did too, and like I said, if you've sat through this super long video, you know, you deserve I don't know, a tolerance medal or whatnot. But thanks for watching, and I guess thanks for watching as always. Okay.